Have you ever wondered if fate is real? I never believed in it until I witnessed a love story so powerful it changed how I see the world. Let me tell you about Amina and Ivan, two souls who found each other against impossible odds. The old man struggled down the street, his back bent under the weight of two overstuffed grocery bags. At 70, Ivan's once strong hands now trembled as he paused in the town square, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool afternoon. The small European town hadn't changed in decades. The same stone buildings, the same judgmental glances, the same suffocating sameness that had become unbearable since his wife's death. 5 years had passed since he buried Olga, his wife of 52 years. The neighbors whispered that he died with her that day. His body just hadn't realized it yet. His home became his tomb. Empty rooms filled with ghostly memories and conversations with someone who wasn't there anymore. That's when fate stepped in. Like a splash of vibrant color in a black and white film, Amina appeared. Her chocolate skin gleamed in the sunlight, her yellow and red Ethiopian dress flowing like fire as she walked. The traditional patterns embroidered on her dress told stories of her homeland, stories of ancient traditions and cultural pride. Heads turned, some in appreciation, others in suspicion. In this tiny European village where everyone looked the same, this beautiful Ethiopian woman stood out like a shooting star in an empty night sky. The university had brought her here, a prestigious scholarship to study under the famous Professor Kovic. They said she was brilliant, ambitious. What they didn't say was how lonely she felt, how the cold stares made her question if she belonged here at all. In her homeland, community was everything. Meals shared together, celebrations that lasted for days, neighbors who became family. Here, doors remained closed, and greetings were brief, formal nods between strangers. Then it happened. That moment, when two lives collide, and nothing is ever the same again. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice cut through his thoughts, musical and warm, carrying the gentle lilt of her native language. "Would you like some help with those bags?" Ivan's head snapped up. When was the last time anyone in this town had offered him help, or even noticed him at all? He stammered, looking into eyes that held kindness without pity. "Yes, thank you." She took the heavier bag effortlessly, her smile brightening the gray afternoon. "I'm Amina. Which way?" As they walked, people stopped and stared. Mrs. Petrova nearly dropped her purse. Mr. Leonov, the butcher, paused mid-cut, his knife suspended in air. An old man and a young African woman walking side by side. It was like seeing a wolf and a deer in friendly conversation. "I'm Ivan," he found himself saying, words spilling out after months of silence. "I've lived here my whole life. 70 years in the same town." 70 years? She marveled. "All the history you must have seen. I've been here 3 weeks, and already I'm counting the days until I can leave." She lowered her voice. "It's beautiful here, but when you look different, it gets lonely being stared at like you're from another planet." When they reached his gate, something strange happened. Ivan didn't want her to leave. For the first time in 5 years, the thought of returning to his empty house felt wrong. "Would you like to come in for tea?" The words escaped before he could stop them. Amina hesitated, looking at the old house with its peeling paint and faded curtains. What she did next would change everything. She looked directly into his eyes and nodded. "I would like that very much. In my country, sharing a drink with someone is never just about quenching thirst. it's about connection. What happened next was like watching a dried-up riverbed suddenly fill with water again. The house that had been a mausoleum came alive. Ivan's hands, which had been trembling with age moments before, moved with purpose as he prepared the old samovar his wife had treasured. "This belonged to my Olga," he explained, polishing its brass surface with his sleeve. "We received it as a wedding gift 52 years ago. In Russia, the samovar is more than just for making tea. It's the heart of the home." Amina traced the intricate patterns with her finger. "It's beautiful. In Ethiopia, we have our own ceremony for coffee. Did you know coffee originated in my country?" She described how coffee beans are roasted in a pan over hot coals, ground with a wooden mortar and pestle, and brewed in a special clay pot. The rich aroma fills the room as neighbors gather around to share news and solve problems over 3 rounds of the strong, sweet coffee. "The first cup is called a bull. It's the strongest," she explained, her eyes lighting up as she spoke of home. "The second cup, Tona, is more moderate, but the third cup, Baraka, brings a blessing to those who share it. My grandmother says it seals friendships and heals old wounds." Ivan listened, fascinated, as she painted pictures with her words of a world so different from his own. Vibrant markets filled with spices, homes where extended families lived together in compound houses, celebrations that brought entire villages together. "Perhaps one day I could make Ethiopian coffee for you," she offered, "though I'd need to find the proper beans and a pot." "I would like that," Ivan replied, surprised by his own enthusiasm. When she left that evening, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in 5 years, Ivan stood at the window and found himself looking forward to tomorrow. Their paths crossed accidentally the next day, and the next. Soon, they were meeting every morning for walks through parts of town tourists never saw. Ivan showed her hidden gardens and ancient trees with roots older than the buildings surrounding them. He taught her words in Russian, simple phrases like "good morning" and "thank you," smiling as she repeated them with her musical accent. In return, Amina taught him a few words in her language, laughing gently when he struggled with the unfamiliar sounds. "Selam," she would say, greeting him each morning, and he would respond with the same, his pronunciation improving day by day. Amina showed him details he'd walked past his entire life without noticing. The way light filtered through leaves, how certain buildings told stories through their architecture. "How can you see so much beauty in this ordinary place?" he asked her once. She smiled that radiant smile that had begun to make his heart feel strangely young again. "In my village, my father taught me to find beauty even during drought seasons. He said, 'Eyes that look for beauty will never return empty.' Perhaps because I'm seeing it through new eyes, and now, so are you." The town noticed. How could they not? The old man, who hadn't spoken more than 5 words in 5 years, was now walking every morning with the exotic foreign student, gesturing animatedly, even, could it be, laughing occasionally. The evening tea ritual transformed both of them. Ivan's kitchen, unused for years except for basic survival, became a place of culinary adventures. Amina brought spices he couldn't pronounce and showed him how to prepare injera, the spongy Ethiopian flatbread that serves as both plate and utensil. She taught him to eat with his hands, scooping up spicy stews with torn pieces of bread, an intimate act of cultural exchange. Ivan found himself sharing recipes Olga had taught him, dishes he'd sworn he'd never cook again because the memories were too painful. He showed Amina how to make borscht, the deep red beetroot soup his mother had made during harsh winters, and dumplings that took hours to prepare but brought families together around the table. Food is memory, he told her, as they worked side by side, his large, wrinkled hands next to her smooth young ones, both dusted with flour. Every dish carries the story of the people who taught us to make it. She nodded in understanding. In my country, we say that a meal shared is a blessing multiplied. Their kitchen became a place where cultures blended and new traditions were born. They created fusion dishes that honored both their heritages, Ethiopian flatbread, topped with Russian-inspired stews, Ethiopian spices, adding warmth to traditional Russian soups. Then came the night that changed everything. They sat on Ivan's porch, watching a sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Amina noticed a silver frame on the small table between them. "Is that your wife?" she asked softly. Ivan picked up the photograph with reverence, as if it might crumble in his hands. "Olga." His voice cracked on the name. "Our wedding day, she was 22. I was 25. In the fading light, Amina could see the handsome young man, with proud shoulders and confident smile, standing beside a woman whose eyes sparkled with joy. "She had a beautiful smile," Amina observed. "She had a beautiful soul," Ivan corrected, his finger tracing the outline of Olga's face through the glass. "She could see goodness in anyone, even me." He set the frame down, with the care one might show a holy relic. "What about you? Is there someone special waiting in Ethiopia?" Amina laughed, a sound like music that seemed to brighten the darkening evening. "My studies are my love. My mother calls weekly to remind me I'm nearly 30 and unmarried, a tragedy in our culture. In the village where I grew up, most women my age have at least 3 children. She's convinced I'll die alone, surrounded by books instead of grandchildren." "And what do you want?" Ivan asked, the directness of his question surprising them both. The question hung between them like a suspended moment. No one had asked her that in a very long time. "To discover things no one else has seen. To learn until my last breath." She turned to face him fully. "And you, Ivan? What do you want from the rest of your life?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. What did he want? For 5 years, he'd wanted nothing but to join Olga in the grave. "I don't know how to want things anymore," he finally whispered. "It feels disrespectful to want to be happy when she's gone." Amina reached across the space between them and did something that would set tongues wagging all over town. She took his weathered hand in her smooth one. "My grandmother always said the dead don't want our grief. They want our joy. They want us to live enough for both." Something broke open inside Ivan then, a dam that had held back everything but sorrow for 5 long years. The days that followed opened new worlds for both of them. Ivan told her about surviving the war as a child, about the hunger and fear, about watching his father march away, never to return. Amina shared how she'd fought for education in her village, how her mother had sold family jewelry, pieces passed down for generations, each with its own story, to pay for her schooling when girls were expected to marry young and bear children. Despite their differences, they found surprising connections. Both knew what it meant to fight for survival, to lose loved ones, to stand against expectations. But paradise never lasts, does it? The whispers began like a slow-building storm. At first, just curious glances, then raised eyebrows, then conversations that stopped abruptly when they approached. It exploded one market day when Marta, Ivan's neighbor for 30 years, approached them between the vegetable stalls. Her smile was sharp as a knife. "Ivan, what a surprise to see you so active these days," she said, her eyes flicking dismissively over Amina. "People are talking, you know, wondering what exactly is happening between you two. Some say it's quite inappropriate." Ivan's face flushed dark red. "Let them talk," he snapped, with a ferocity that surprised even himself. "They have nothing better to do with their empty lives." Marta's expression hardened. "Olga would be ashamed," she hissed before walking away. Those 4 words struck like physical blows. That night, as they sat in Ivan's garden, watching fireflies, his shoulders slumped with invisible weight. "Perhaps we should stop meeting so often," he said, each word clearly causing him pain. "This town is cruel. They'll make your life difficult. Your studies—" "Are you ashamed of me, Ivan?" Amina interrupted, her voice unusually sharp. His head snapped up. "Never. How could you think?" "Then why do you care what they say?" Her eyes flashed with fire. "My father stood against our entire village to let me go to school. When they said girls shouldn't be educated, he replied, 'Those who follow the crowd never go further than the crowd.'" She took his hand, an act of defiance, now that they knew people were watching. "I didn't cross continents and oceans to hide in shadows, because small minds can't understand friendship." In that moment, something awakened in Ivan. Something he thought had died with Olga. Not just affection, but courage. But just as darkness feels absolute before dawn, a light appeared from an unexpected source. Victor, who had fought alongside Ivan's father in the war, approached them one afternoon as they sat on a park bench. "Ivan Nikolaevich!" Victor's booming voice scattered nearby pigeons. "God himself must have performed a miracle. My wife says she heard you laughing yesterday. We thought your laugh had died with Olga." He turned to Amina and bowed slightly. "Whatever magic you've worked on this old bear, young lady, the angels themselves must be applauding." Others followed, small kindnesses in a sea of judgment. Old Lydia, who fed the birds each morning at dawn, nodded approvingly as they passed. "The heart recognizes its own medicine," she told them cryptically. "Only fools argue with healing." But for every Victor and Lydia, there were 20 others who crossed themselves when Amina passed, who whispered, "Shameful," just loud enough to hear, who asked pointed questions about what a girl like her wanted with a man like him. The university became a battlefield for Amina. Her professor called her to his office. "Your grades are slipping," he said, without looking up from her paper. "Perhaps fewer distractions would help you focus on why you're really here." Her classmates were crueler still. "Is it a visa thing?" one asked brazenly. "Or is he paying you? No judgment. We're just curious how it works." For Ivan, the blow came directly to his heart when his daughter-in-law called. "Father Ivan," she began with artificial sweetness, "Mikhail and I are concerned about these rumors. People say you've lost your senses, that this African girl is taking advantage. Have you changed your will recently?" That night, the weight of it all crashed down. They sat in silence, their tea growing cold, the usual comfort of their ritual shattered by the day's cruelties. "We need to talk about what's happening," Ivan finally said, his voice hoarse. Amina set down her cup with a decisive click. "Yes, we do." The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking a moment from which there would be no return. "I never thought—" Ivan's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "When you helped me with those grocery bags, I was just a lonely old man waiting to die. And now the entire town has decided they know what's happening between us, Amina finished, anger flashing in her eyes. They've created this dirty story in their minds. What is happening between us, Amina? Ivan asked, the question bursting from somewhere deep inside him. What is this feeling? The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and electric. Amina's hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. You've become essential to me, she finally said, like water or air. The thought of not seeing you tomorrow makes it hard to breathe. Ivan felt his heart thundering in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in decades. When Olga died, I thought I would never feel alive again. I was just existing, waiting. Then you appeared, and suddenly there were colors again, and sounds, and I started to care whether the sun would rise tomorrow. He reached across the space between them, his weathered hand hovering uncertainly. I never expected to find this with anyone again, especially not with someone young enough to be your granddaughter, she offered, her voice tight. Someone extraordinary enough to make me believe in second chances, he corrected gently. A tear slipped down Amina's cheek. My parents would disown me if they knew. In my culture, age is respected, but this, a relationship with such an age difference, would be seen as shameful. Your children already think I'm after your money. The university has all but accused me of impropriety. Ivan's hand finally closed the distance, covering hers. Then perhaps we need help figuring this out. Someone who can help us understand what we're feeling and what we should do about it. His eyes met hers, vulnerable and uncertain. Because I don't think I can go back to the darkness, Amina. Not now that I've seen the light again. They found Dr. Petrov in the next town over, far enough away that gossip couldn't follow them. The small office with its faded blue walls became their sanctuary, the only place they could speak freely about what was happening between them. The first session was excruciating. Ivan sat rigid, decades of keeping emotions locked inside, making every word a battle. Amina struggled to explain concepts from her culture that had no direct translation. The Ethiopian concept of deep spiritual connection, the importance of respected elders who traditionally would guide such complex matters of the heart. But by their third visit, something had shifted. What I'm hearing, Dr. Petrov said, leaning forward in her chair, isn't about age or culture or what's appropriate. You two have found something most people search their whole lives for and never find. The real question isn't whether your feelings are genuine. Clearly they are. It's whether you're brave enough to face what protecting those feelings will cost you. Those words hit like lightning. Over the next weeks, they worked harder than either had worked before, learning to communicate honestly, to voice fears without shame, to stand firm against external pressures. Then came the moment they'd both been dreading, facing their families. Ivan's children arrived on a Sunday afternoon, tension radiating from them before they even stepped through the door. Mikhail, his middle son, barely concealed his hostility. Alexei, the eldest, watched everything with suspicious eyes. Elena, his daughter, at least attempted politeness. Dinner was a battlefield of loaded questions. So, Amina, Mikhail said, cutting his meat with surgical precision, what exactly attracted you to my father? His wisdom? Or perhaps his assets? Before Amina could respond, Ivan slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. That's enough, his voice thundered through the room. For 5 years, none of you visited more than twice a year. Did you even notice I was dying inside? Amina saw me, not an old man, not a bank account, but a human being with thoughts and feelings and things still to offer this world. Stunned silence fell over the table. Later, as they were leaving, Elena pulled Amina aside. "I haven't seen fire in my father's eyes since before my mother died," she whispered. "Whatever this is between you, it saved him. Just please don't hurt him. He couldn't survive losing someone again." Even Mikhail seemed chastened. As they left, Alexei was overheard saying, "Mother always said she wanted him to find joy again, if something happened to her. Maybe we should remember that. But if Ivan's family was difficult, Amina's would be nearly impossible." The video call to Ethiopia was arranged weeks in advance. Time difference and unreliable internet connections making spontaneous communication impossible. They sat side by side in front of the laptop, Amina's hands trembling as she connected the call. When her parents' faces appeared on screen, their initial smiles froze at the sight of Ivan sitting beside their daughter. Amina spoke rapidly in her native tongue, her voice rising and falling with emotion. Ivan couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone: explanation, pleading, determination. Her father's expression darkened, her mother's eyes filled with tears. After what seemed an eternity, her father spoke in English, his voice formal and cold. "This is not our way, Amina. This is not what we sent you abroad to find." Amina's chin lifted in a gesture Ivan had come to recognize as her preparing for battle. "Abai, I found what I wasn't looking for. Isn't that what you always taught me about true discovery?" Her father's eyes narrowed, but something in his expression shifted slightly. "We will discuss this when you come home. You will come home, yes?" Amina glanced at Ivan, then back to the screen. "Yes, Abai. We will come home." The "we" hung in the air like a challenge. Her father's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict her. It was, Ivan realized, the smallest possible victory, but a victory nonetheless. Renovating the house became their salvation. Every nail Ivan hammered, every wall Amina painted, was an act of defiance against a world that said they didn't belong together. They worked from sunrise to sunset, transforming the broken structure into something beautiful, just as they were transforming each other's lives. Ivan discovered strengths he thought age had stolen from him. His hands, once trembling with weakness, grew steady as he repaired cabinets and replaced broken tiles. Decades of knowledge came flooding back, skills his father had taught him that he'd never imagined using again. Amina revealed talents Ivan had never seen. She negotiated with contractors like a seasoned diplomat, designed spaces with an artist's eye, and somehow convinced the hardware store to deliver materials at half price. She wove traditional Ethiopian fabrics into curtains and cushions, filling the house with vibrant colors and patterns that told stories of her homeland. The kitchen became their first victory, a blend of cultures and traditions. Ivan insisted on a proper Russian oven for bread making. Amina created space for Ethiopian coffee ceremonies with a special corner for the traditional pot and small cups. The walls they painted a warm terracotta that reminded her of the earth around her childhood home. As they worked, they talked about everything: childhood memories, secret fears, impossible dreams. The physical labor somehow made it easier to speak truths they might otherwise have kept hidden. "I'm terrified that one day you'll wake up and realize you've wasted your youth on an old man," Ivan confessed as they painted the living room. Amina lowered her brush. "And I'm afraid you'll decide I'm not worth losing your children over," she countered softly. "Fear is a poor architect, Ivan. Let's not build our home on it." Word of their project spread through town. Most people shook their heads in disapproval. But then something unexpected happened. Allies emerged from unlikely places. Victor arrived one morning with his toolbox. "These old bones still remember how to fix a roof," he announced. "And my wife sent jam. Says you're both too skinny." Lydia appeared with seedlings for the garden. "Herbs for healing," she explained cryptically. "Plant them under the full moon." Even Eleanor, Ivan's daughter, came one weekend with her children. "They should know their grandfather," she said simply, "and the extraordinary woman who brought him back to life." The house slowly transformed from a shelter into a home. Their home. A place where neither was a visitor, where both belonged completely. On the walls hung photographs of both their families, Ivan's parents in formal poses from another era, Amina's relatives in colorful groups outside compound houses, their different pasts displayed side by side, creating a shared future. The garden bloomed as if blessed. Ivan planted sturdy vegetables that his mother had grown during hard times: potatoes, cabbage, beets for soup. Amina created flower beds filled with Ethiopian plants whose seeds she had carried across oceans, grasses and herbs difficult to grow in this climate, but stubbornly surviving, like Amina herself. Together, they built something neither could have created alone: a garden where Russian potatoes and Ethiopian spices grew side by side, unlikely companions flourishing in shared soil. Their home became the backdrop for cultural exchange. Amina taught Ivan traditional Ethiopian dances, laughing as he clumsily attempted the shoulder movements. He showed her Russian folk songs, his voice cracking on the high notes as she clapped in rhythm. They celebrated holidays from both traditions. Orthodox Christmas, with all its solemn rituals, followed weeks later by the Ethiopian Timkat festival, with its joyous processions and renewal of baptismal vows. Then, disaster struck. It happened on a market day in early autumn. Ivan and Amina were shopping for provisions when Ivan suddenly clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. Before Amina could reach him, he collapsed to the cobblestones. The next hours were a blur of sirens, antiseptic hospital corridors, and the terrifying language of medical emergencies: myocardial infarction, critical condition, intensive care. Amina sat alone in the waiting room, ignored by nurses who assumed she couldn't be family. When Ivan's children arrived, Mikhail tried to have her removed. "Family only," he snapped. "You have no right to be here." Amina stood her ground, chin raised. "I am the person he comes home to every night. I am the person who knows which medications he takes and when. I am the person he loves. I'm not leaving." The standoff might have escalated if the doctor hadn't intervened. "Your father is asking for someone named Amina," he told Mikhail. "Is that you?" he asked, turning to her. Mikhail's face darkened, but he stepped aside. Ivan looked small and pale against the hospital sheets, tubes and monitors surrounding him like some strange electronic forest. When he saw Amina, his eyes filled with tears. "I thought I might die without seeing you again," he whispered. She took his hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. "You're not going anywhere. We have a garden to finish." He smiled weakly. "The doctors say it was a warning, not a full attack. But Amina, this is what happens. This is what being with an old man means. Today, it's a warning. Next year, next month, it could be the real thing." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. "Then we make every day count." The hospital stay revealed something neither had fully realized: how completely their lives had intertwined. Amina knew Ivan's medical history better than his own children. Ivan had memorized the names of all Amina's professors and classmates. They had built a life together so seamlessly that neither could imagine functioning without the other. It also crystallized something else. They needed to define their relationship, to give it a name and structure that even this rigid society would have to recognize. After Ivan's recovery, they made a decision that shocked everyone, including themselves. "We should get married," Ivan said one evening, as they sat in their garden watching fireflies dance among the plants. Amina nearly dropped her tea. "Married? Ivan, are you sure?" He took her hand, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "I almost died in that hospital, and all I could think was that you would have no legal rights, not to stay in our home, not to make decisions if I couldn't, not even to visit me if Mikhail had his way." He squeezed her fingers gently. "This isn't about romance, Amina. This is practical. This is protection." She studied his face in the fading light. "And if my parents disown me completely, if your children never speak to you again, then we still have each other," he said simply. "Isn't that what matters most?" The wedding was small, necessity rather than choice. The town's priest refused to perform the ceremony. Most neighbors declined invitations. Even the civil official at the registry office could barely hide his disapproval. But some came. Victor and his wife brought homemade vodka and a cake decorated with both Russian and Ethiopian symbols. Lydia arrived with herbs woven into a blessing crown that combined traditions from both cultures. Elena attended with her 2 children, though her brothers stayed away. And most surprisingly, watching from a laptop propped on a chair, were Amina's parents. Their faces were solemn, their approval far from given, but they were there, witnessing a small first step. "My father says he doesn't understand," Amina translated after speaking with them privately, "but he remembers his own father disowned him for marrying my mother. He doesn't want to repeat that mistake." Life as a married couple brought new challenges and unexpected joys. They traveled when Ivan felt strong enough, first to neighboring countries, then further. In Greece, they walked ancient ruins under golden sunlight. In France, they sipped wine in tiny cafes where no one knew or cared about their unusual union. Most meaningful was their journey to Ethiopia. Amina's parents had agreed to meet Ivan in person, a gesture that brought tears to her eyes when they announced it. The trip was difficult for Ivan. The altitude, the heat, the strange foods. But watching Amina walk the streets of her childhood, seeing her face light up as she showed him her world, made every discomfort worthwhile. They stayed in her family compound, where generations lived together in circular huts arranged around a common area. Ivan learned to eat with his right hand only, as tradition demanded, and to drink honey wine from small glasses. He participated in a traditional coffee ceremony, where Amina's mother roasted green beans over charcoal, filling the air with an intoxicating aroma as family members gathered to share in the ritual 3 cups. Her father was stern at first, studying Ivan with suspicious eyes. But when Ivan presented him with a handcrafted wooden box he had spent months making, something changed. "In my culture," Ivan explained through Amina's translation, "we believe a gift made by hand carries part of the giver's soul. I offer you this piece of myself, as thanks for the greatest gift I have ever received, your daughter's presence in my life." The old man ran his fingers over the intricate carving, a fusion of Russian and Ethiopian designs that Ivan had researched meticulously. His eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "You have learned our patterns," he said, in his limited English. Ivan nodded. I am learning everything I can about the world that created such an extraordinary person. That evening, Amina's father invited Ivan to join the men for coffee, an honor neither had expected. It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a beginning. During their time in Ethiopia, Ivan immersed himself in Amina's culture. He learned the proper way to greet elders with a slight bow, how to participate in the shoulder dancing, though his attempts made the children giggle, and the rituals of a traditional Ethiopian Orthodox church service. He listened as Amina's mother taught her recipes passed down through generations, watching carefully so he could help recreate them when they returned home. Their story might have remained private, just one unlikely tale of love in a small town, if not for what happened next. A writer for a national magazine visited the university to profile Professor Kovic and encountered Amina during his research. Intrigued by the Ethiopian student who had married a local widower, he convinced them to share their story. The article, titled "The 70-Year-Old Man Who Found Love Against All Odds," went viral. Suddenly, Ivan and Amina found themselves reluctant symbols of something larger than themselves, a challenge to society's rigid definitions of family, partnership, and love. Letters poured in from around the world. Elderly widowers wrote to say the story gave them hope. Young women in cross-cultural relationships shared their struggles. Organizations fighting age discrimination and cultural prejudice asked them to speak at events. At first, they refused all invitations. Their relationship wasn't a statement or a cause, it was simply their life. But then came the letter from an elderly Russian man and his young African caretaker who had fallen in love but feared the consequences of acknowledging their feelings. Your courage has shown us what's possible, the letter concluded. We are no longer afraid. That letter changed everything. Ivan and Amina realized their most private choice had created a small ripple of change in the world. They began speaking at small gatherings, then larger ones. Amina, with her academic background, spoke eloquently about cultural barriers and how to bridge them. Ivan, with his simple, honest way of speaking, touched hearts with his message that life can begin again at any age. Their home became a gathering place for unlikely couples facing societal judgment. They offered counsel, support, and most importantly, living proof that happiness was possible. Their small town, which had once shunned them, began to see economic benefits from their minor celebrity. The mayor, who had initially refused to officiate their wedding, now proudly introduced them as our most famous residents when journalists visited. With visitors came opportunities to share cultures. Ivan and Amina began hosting monthly gatherings where people from different backgrounds could share food, music, and stories. These events grew famous for their blend of Russian and Ethiopian traditions. Borscht served alongside spicy chicken stew, traditional Russian folk dances followed by Ethiopian shoulder dancing, storytelling that compared folk tales from both cultures to reveal surprising similarities. Their home reflected this cultural fusion. In one corner sat the traditional Russian samovar, beside an Ethiopian coffee ceremony setup. Walls displayed both Orthodox Christian icons and colorful Ethiopian religious paintings. The garden became a living testament to their harmonious union. Russian apple trees shading Ethiopian grasses, neither plant native to the small European town, but both thriving under their care. Time passed. Amina completed her degree with honors and began teaching at the university, specializing in cross-cultural art history. Ivan's health stabilized as he found purpose in their shared mission. Most importantly, their love deepened into something neither had imagined possible, a union of souls that transcended age, culture, and society's expectations. Each year, they added new traditions to their life together. They celebrated Ethiopian holidays alongside Russian Orthodox Christmas and Easter. They taught each other childhood songs and lullabies. Ivan learned to make traditional Ethiopian bread, while Amina mastered the art of Russian dumplings. They taught each other words and phrases in their native languages, creating a private vocabulary that blended Russian and Amharic, their own personal dialect of love. The final chapter of their story came 8 years after they first met, when Ivan's heart, which had been given a second life through love, finally began to fail. As he lay in their bedroom, surrounded by the life they had built together, he took Amina's hand. "I need you to promise me something," he whispered, his voice weak but determined. "Anything," she answered, fighting back tears. "When I'm gone, don't stop living. Don't withdraw like I did after Olga. Remember how precious every moment is." She nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "And one more thing," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "If someday you find love again, young or old, from anywhere in the world, embrace it. Don't let my memory keep you from joy." 3 days later, surrounded by those who had come to love him, Amina, Elena, and her children, Victor and his wife, even Alexei, who had finally reconciled with his father, Ivan closed his eyes for the last time. The funeral was unlike any the town had ever seen. People came from across the country and around the world, couples whose lives had been changed by Ivan and Amina's story, students Amina had taught, journalists who had covered their unusual marriage. Even Amina's parents made the long journey from Ethiopia, standing solemnly beside their daughter as she said goodbye to the man who had divided their family and then, somehow, helped heal it. In accordance with Ivan's wishes, the service blended Orthodox Christian traditions with Ethiopian mourning customs. The Russian Orthodox priest, who had once refused to marry them, now officiated alongside an Ethiopian Orthodox priest who had traveled with Amina's family. Sacred songs in Russian and Amharic filled the air, and mourners carried both candles and the traditional Ethiopian mourning torch. Most surprisingly, Mikhail approached Amina after the service. "I didn't understand," he said stiffly. "I thought many things that weren't true, but I saw how happy you made him, how alive. Thank you for giving my father back to us, even if it was only for a few years." In the days that followed, Amina moved through grief, unlike anything she had known before. The house they had built together felt impossibly empty without Ivan's presence. Sometimes she thought she heard his voice, his footsteps, the sound of his tools in the workshop, but she kept her promise. She did not withdraw from life. She continued teaching, speaking, traveling. Their garden still bloomed, though sometimes she sat alone among the plants and wept when memories became too much to bear. She continued their cultural traditions, performing the coffee ceremony alone, but setting out 3 cups, as though Ivan might still join her. 1 year after Ivan's death, Amina established a foundation in his name, dedicated to supporting cross-cultural understanding and combating prejudice against age-gap relationships. The Ivan Petrov Foundation provided scholarships, funded community programs, and offered legal support to couples facing discrimination. The foundation's headquarters was their renovated home, where couples could come for retreats and workshops. The garden became a community space where children learned about plants from different cultures. The kitchen, where Ivan and Amina had cooked together, became a classroom for culinary cultural exchange. Through this work, Amina ensured that their story, which began with a chance meeting over grocery bags, continued to create ripples of change long after Ivan was gone. In the foundation's main hall hung a large photograph of Ivan and Amina on their wedding day. Beside it, emblazoned on the wall in both Russian and Amharic, were the words Ivan had spoken in his final days. Love knows no age, no color, no boundaries. It simply knows the heart it seeks. In the end, their love had become something greater than either of them could have imagined. Not just a personal bond, but a light, showing others what was possible when courage overcame fear and love defied boundaries. So there you have it, the true story behind that clickbait title. Not what you expected, was it? No scandal, no exploitation, just two souls who found each other against impossible odds. The 70-year-old man who came to Amina's life didn't bring drama or controversy. He brought something far more powerful. He brought love, acceptance, and the courage to be truly herself. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late for a second chance at happiness. Drop a comment below telling me what touched you most about Ivan and Amina's journey. And stay tuned for next week, when I'll bring you another incredible true story about the woman who discovered her husband's secret life after 30 years of marriage. Trust me, it's not what you think.